Today, we get a first look at Tanium patch management for ServiceNow. Welcome back to Tanium Tech Talks. I'm your host, Ashley McGlone, and this is kind of rare. I'm a little bit lost for words today. We just finished this big series on ServiceNow integrations, and there's already more coming. The integration team just keeps cranking out new efficiencies with the ServiceNow platform. I mean, think about this. Imagine if your change control system for workstation and server patching were integrated with the patching tool. All that's left is playing video games all day, right? I mean, ServiceNow is already automating all the patching based on the patch windows, maintenance windows you've already defined. So, but I'm guessing they're not going to let you play games at work all day. But imagine everything else on your project list that you could tackle if patching were just a set it and forget it exercise. I mean, wow. So our guest today is no stranger to the show. We got to catch up at Black Hat recently. It was good to see him. And we got to meet some of you there also in person as we were talking about the Better Together ServiceNow story at Black Hat just a few months ago. So help me welcome Saqib back to the show. And for those who haven't met you yet, Saqib, please introduce yourself.
Good to see you again. Of course, Black Hat was amazing as always. Got to hang out with everybody there, including ServiceNow and our customers. But my name is Saqib Khan. I'm the field CIO for ServiceNow at Tanium. I'm responsible for all our field engagements globally across our customers, our partners, and responsible for ensuring our products that we release are by far some of the world-class integrations that you can use on the ServiceNow platform.
They sure are, and we just keep delivering them. And folks, if you've not seen any of the other ServiceNow integration videos, just go check out the Tech Talk playlist here. There's a ton of them with Saqib and Brandon and the team. Has done some amazing work. There's a great team over there. So for this particular one, Saqib, what's the problem we're trying to solve?
Every customer and partner has asked us about, when are you going to do patching with ServiceNow? And let me explain the problem statement. The problem statement is really straightforward. Today, patching is done in a lot of different tools outside of ServiceNow, but yet ServiceNow is a change management system. And so the process typically starts with the change management system, with a change request, with a level of governance and process and people. And then we try to incorporate all of the data from all these tools into a change so we can understand what to patch, how to patch it, and who needs to be aware of that patch deployment going out. So what we're trying to solve is that gap between these tools and the change management function and bring that together in a simplified, fully automated workflow driven by ServiceNow.
Yeah, I know we discussed some of this in one of the previous episodes. We touched on it just briefly, but I mean, this process, so many teams have too many teams with too many tools telling each other what to do, trying to, fight it out through this patching process every month between different systems with all the spreadsheets and all the crazy stuff you have to do and I don't know anybody that enjoys filling out a change control and anything you can automate with that in addition to actually doing the work. I mean, that just sounds like a bunch of wins stacked on top of one another.
An average patch cycle for customers could be 30, 60, 90 days for even their criticals and highs because the bottleneck and gap is in the process of a change or understanding even what to patch. Look at your Patch Tuesday lifecycle today. Go back and review how you guys take that step and decide what needs to go in your monthly patching schedule. And then all the steps you take that are unnecessary for people to be taking versus automation that can help you reduce a lot of that burden and give back that time to your team so they can focus on the quality of the patch deployment lifecycle versus worrying about the process steps.
We're going to get into a demo in just a minute, but could you just give us the quick thumbnail sketch here? What's the big picture of exactly what did we build to solve that problem?
Tanium Patch as a product of Tanium itself is a very good product for Windows, Linux, and Mac patch capabilities, including the ability to not only understand what patches are available on a daily schedule by knowing from the different repositories what patches are available and for which endpoints they're applicable, but also being able to tell you what's critical, what's high, et cetera, and then be able to schedule deployments using templates that follow maintenance windows, et cetera. And in a nutshell, Tanium does that really well at scale for the largest companies in the world today. And we do that with our patented architecture in real time, as most of you know. So we figured that the gap here is that while that's all being done in the background, there's still that process of change happening in ServiceNow manually. So what we built is the ability to import our patches and definitions and their statuses on endpoints that are applicable patch statuses into ServiceNow, and then pull in powerful data from a daily sync that will enable customers and organizations to be able to create good reports, metrics, patch efficacy baselines, so then they can do effective patching and understand what to focus on in a workflow in ServiceNow. And second part of this, Ashley, is that knowing what to patch is not exactly the outcome that we're looking for only out of this integration. It's the ability to automate the actual deployment itself. So a core part of this integration is to be able to deploy the patch through ServiceNow as a request, and that request is tied to a change ticket that can then be following your organization's change process. So those are the two key outcomes that we deliver with this integration.
It's almost like you've hired another person on your team to sit there and plug in the changes in Tanium patch, and it would API automate in there, and here's the patch deployment with the change number and all that stuff automatically logged in. The status comes back to. I'm getting the picture here. This is amazing. So I've got to ask then. I'm sure there were some customers early here that helped us prototype this. What are we hearing from customers in the early phases?
What the feedback I hear often is, one, this is going to make our lives so much easier. Two, it's going to streamline a process across teams that today are very siloed. Like Windows people might not follow the same process as Linux people, might not follow the same process as Mac people. And it's those silos that we're breaking down, standardizing things around patch lifecycle management, and then ensuring that governance for a lot of you that have the requirement to report back to your directors and VPs and C-level executives that we're keeping our patch cycles and SLAs met every month. Those are the things that customers are saying to us, is that that's what's going to be improving and increasing in terms of outcomes for all of those parties involved.
With previous integrations, we've talked about, okay, you got to have this licensed on the ServiceNow side. You got to have this licensed on the Tanium side. So obviously we need Tanium patch, but help me understand, what else do we need as far as licensing is concerned on both sides?
So this is actually a pretty straightforward integration. Aside from Tanium patch as a core requirement on the Tanium side, you actually don't need anything in ServiceNow except for ITSM. And ITSM, of course, every customer starts their journey there. So change management is a core requirement. Aside from that, where you plug in the workflows you build on this integration, which we're going to walk through later, is going to be where your dependencies lie. So let's say you want to incorporate your patch lifecycle with this integration with some correlation with security incidents because they're critical patches that failed. So you might need SIR, you might need other things, but at the core, all you need is ITSM and Tanium patch.
So that sounds like a low bar for entry as far as licensing. I'm sure that's music to a lot of people's ears. So how do they get it then?
Yeah, good question. So like any other application for ServiceNow and Tanium, it will be a fully certified application on the ServiceNow store. And this application, just like any other application you download today for ServiceNow for testing and production readiness, you go to the ServiceNow store and you would find the Tanium application for Tanium patch management. This is obviously still being reviewed by our certification team, so it will be available in the next several weeks on the store, and very straightforward process for installation.
Which is the next question, right? So I go to the store. We've done that in several other integration videos, store.servicenow.com, search for Tanium. There it is. So then I know in those other ones, there was the integration core. And prior to recording here, you said that there's some big updates for that. So what's required to actually set it up then?
One thing I didn't actually mention when you asked the question around what are the dependencies, actually, Integration Core as a SDK for ServiceNow for Tanium is a dependency for this integration. And we did this purposely because we wanted to ensure that there is a one-stop shop for all integrations going forward that go through the Integration Core SDK to make it simple for people to install this application without worrying about the headache of it coming with technical debt around management of any sort of scripts or methods, et cetera, et cetera. So for developers, it's really easy to navigate the application. For administrators, it's really simple to configure it and install it and use it versus worrying about yet another integration that requires another API token that requires another 20 different steps to configure. It's built on top of the integration core. So that is a requirement, and that is available on the store today as a dependency that already supports the integration. So definitely get that first.
So the good news is once you've got that integration core, because you're probably doing other ServiceNow integrations, once you've already put in your API keys and your URLs and all those things you normally do with integration, it sounds like from there it's just maybe a couple deltas and you're ready to go.
Exactly. Yeah, it's very simple, straightforward. The configuration of the patch management solution is actually 2 steps. So it's not a 20-step process. It's a guided setup. It takes less than 5 minutes to install and configure after integration core is set up correctly.
Well, I'm all about 5 minute setups. That's amazing. I mean, back in the day, we were plugging floppies for an hour, so that's way back. That's dating me a little bit. So let's. Why don't we go in and take a look and show us? We've kind of set this up pretty well. Everybody's eager to see it now.
Great. Well, I figured I'd start with a demo, and I think the demo serves a key purpose in understanding how an organization would actually anticipate using this. And then we'll get into the mechanics or the plumbing of the integration, so people understand how to set it up, how to configure it, and use it from a different sort of persona, which is the I guess you would call that the creator in the ServiceNow world or the builder of workflows. We're going to actually go into ServiceNow and look at this view as a user of as a patch owner, a server owner that wants to patch machines that they own. So I'm logged in as a patch owner right now. And as you can see, this is a ServiceNow portal. This is where we ask for help. We can search for it. We can request something. We can search for a knowledge base. We can also chat with an agent. And this agent is really important because what it does is it provides you with a simplified experience to ask for help without actually searching. So I need help to schedule a patch. And talking through this agent, it kind of picks up on what type of help you need. So it found that I needed patch deployment, help with the patch deployment or scheduling a patch deployment. And
All right,
using
so I got to pause you right here because I want to make sure our audience understands. I don't know that everybody's aware of the investment that ServiceNow has made in AI for years. And this is the fruit of that. So you've got skills on the back end that are powered by Tanium services here that we're connecting with.
Correct. Yeah. So there's two sides of this. There's a ServiceNow Now Assist AI experience, and then there's a core ServiceNow virtual agent experience. Very similar in terms of chat and in terms of how we are going to go forward with AI with ServiceNow. But at the core of it is the chat itself, the virtual agent. The agent can either use an LLM and Tanium skills, or it can use pre-built conversational dialogue that are also options. So the great thing about this integration is that you have the option of using both, right? You don't need to specifically say it's built on one thing or the other. As you're building your Now Assist AI experiences or virtual agent experiences, these are things that are just things that we fit into just out of the box. So those experiences you design yourself, and we provide the ability to do patching and work with your workflows in those experiences.
So I'm guessing the traditional ServiceNow console interface experience is still there. You can still do it manually, but this is the fun stuff to play with right here.
Correct. Yeah. So this is the where you want to be if you really wanted to make it easy for people like me who are server owners to request patching. You don't want them to go through a ServiceNow form and have to click 20 different times just to get to creating a change. You'd rather have them walk through a bunch of questions, conversate with something that understands what you're doing, and maybe even provide a little bit of historical context on, let's say I'm patching for Windows and it talks to you, right? It asks you, hey, when do you want to add patches from? Maybe I'm missing all my patches for August. So I'm gonna select that. And maybe at this point as well, as I go through with this, I'm going to be able to understand that not only is it taking everything I'm saying and putting it into a request for ServiceNow and Tanium to create, but also be able to quickly navigate from here to maybe looking up historical context around my QA endpoints that I'm trying to patch. So if I select my QA endpoints, not only is it going to go ahead and create the change for me, but it's also going to tell me that, you know what, last year for QA, 5% of your endpoints were offline. So what does that mean? Does that mean that there's more risk for the 5%? You can add in other data points from different experiences into your chat experience. A lot of the Now Assist AI developers or administrators that are going to be starting to use this, they do have access to very rich data from Tanium, historical contacts, current contacts data, live data, real-time skills. And those are the things in the near future that will be available for them to add into these type of experiences.
So just to summarize here, I just got to pause for our audience who's watching this. Did you just see what happened? When like we were taking our time in like 2 or 3 minutes with a chat experience, we already opened a change control. We told it which servers we wanted to patch because we had our server list defined here, our QA environment. And then we told it, here's the window, start to end date for when I want the patches to go out. Here's the date. I want to get all the patches after that date. This looks pretty simple.
Yeah, 2 minutes, maybe 1 to 2 minutes maximum. This is an experience for someone to not have to do anything but just chat. There is also other ways to do this, where you request it through a proper form. A lot of customers use catalog items today in ServiceNow. And just like we did with the chat, we can select things. Sometimes this is a little bit more easier for people to build in ServiceNow rather than a chat experience. But as people mature into virtual agent and Now Assist, know that those capabilities with Tanium are there. You can use whatever experience you want with the ability of using this data to then initiate a patch request through a change.
I just had an idea as you're talking about this. I do a lot of work with manufacturing customers. They've got sites all over the world. They've got different shutdown windows of when those things, when their changes are actually able to be done. They could just self-service right here. This is amazing.
Yeah, exactly. I can do regional lookups. This is the benefit of Tanium combined with ServiceNow data, that ServiceNow has functional information about your geographical locations where your endpoints are located. It also understands ways to look up domain-based lookups for QA endpoints, whatever you want. I mean, we can work with any type of table in ServiceNow to come up with the right requirements. So your server owners are mandated to actually go through a list of things to check off and select before they submit the request for a change, which actually alleviates like 10 to 20% of the initial work you have to do looking at spreadsheets or understanding where your QA endpoints are or which ones have been passed through ring 1 or 2 or whatever. You can actually do that all in a single form or chat, make it super simple.
Most companies have a ServiceNow team of administrators and developers. So I'm guessing then maybe there's a template for what a patch form would look like, and they could just take that and adjust it maybe for their own environment.
Yes, exactly. A lot of customers that I work with today already have this built. What they don't have, though, is the actual mechanics of getting it into Tanium properly through a certified change management integration like we have it. And so this takes away all the technical debt of a custom integration, the reliability of the APIs that we built for this specifically, and then also gives you the control over any experience. So the next thing we're going to walk through actually is how this is actually set up in the back end, and I think that will resonate a lot with a lot of the developers and architects that are looking to customize this for their experience. When we look at the back end, the Tanium application is called Tanium Patch Management. Inside of this application, you have a guided setup. And as you install the application and configure integration core, you'll see that there's only 3 core steps to actually get it installed and configured. Of course, you have to make sure you run the integration core setup, which is a separate integration, which most of you probably have. If not, get it, because that's going to be kind of the core SDK going forward. And everything's going to be built on top of that. And then you have 2 steps here. That's it. That's all there is. There's just 3 steps. The 3 steps are last 2 steps are to sync all of the definitions from Tanium Patch into ServiceNow's records and sync their current status on endpoints or CIs in the ServiceNow world on if they're installed on those endpoints or not. And these 2 jobs run on a daily schedule, and it ensures that you have the latest definitions and the current applicability into ServiceNow.
And
That's
I'm,
all
I'm
there
going to
is.
guess here because you mentioned CIs. Those are the assets here for the hardware, software, all that.
Right.
So I know from previous integrations, a big one is our CMDB ITAM integration for building out all that data. But I'm going to guess that's not a hard requirement as long as you wink, wink, trust your CMDB data. But I'm guessing really a good first step here would be to set up the ITAM CMDB integration. I mean, so many people already have that done. If you don't have that, I'd probably start there because that's going to get you most of the way on your integration core as well.
Absolutely. I mean, look, your CMDB is the core foundations of everything you do in ServiceNow. Whether you believe that or not, it is something you're going to need to have accurate, like we follow the 3 metrics of correctness, completeness, and the health of the CMDB. And to get that to that point of making sure it's trustworthy data into the CMDB, you need to have service graph connectors feeding the CMDB with ServiceNow Discovery, obviously, to make sure you can trust it. Otherwise, what's going to happen is I'm going to sync my patch definitions, but I'm not going to have any statuses because there's no one-to-one match with a serial number for my applicability for my Linux servers or Windows servers, or the FQDN doesn't match. There's some data integrity issue that's going to cause you to be out of sync with how we look at Tanium patches versus CMDB CIs that are applicable for it. So it's very important. So let's pivot into what we actually do with the integration. So after you've set it up and you see your patch statuses coming in for all of your endpoints, you see your patch definitions coming in from Tanium Patch. There's different classifications of patches, of course. And if I group by classification, you're also going to see the different types of classifications, bug fixes, enhancements, features, packages, releases, etc. Some of these things will have CVEs associated with it. Some of them will not have CVEs associated with it. Some of them might be superseded, like this one, for example, the monthly quality rollup for Windows 7. And so there's a lot of good, rich data here to now start to really understand how you're going to create reporting dashboards, trend lines for your metrics. You may have a patch efficacy report that you create out of the box first to understand your baseline and current state to measure against the actual impact of this integration and maybe the automation you build, which we're going to go through in just a second. So the first step is to get this data in and understand which endpoints these patches are applicable for. Then you know exactly what's in your environment currently and against your CIs in the CMDB or assets in Tanium. That's the first step, Ashley. Now, the second step is using the integration to actually execute the patches. Traditionally, customers and organizations have had a separate form like we were talking about earlier and showing you in the catalog. But that form was just a request itself. It wasn't the ability to actually deploy the patch. It's just to keep a record that you want to have a deployment created, and then go through a separate step of creating a change. So what we did was we created the ability for you to do the deployment of the patch through what we call a Tanium patch request. And if I look at the Tanium patch request I have here, it's very simple and straightforward in the back end. Now, we don't expect customers or partners or anyone to use this directly. What we want to do is help you use this in a meaningful workflow that means something for you for your SLAs. So you might have a 30, 60, 90-day SLA for internet-facing or non-internet-facing servers for criticals and highs. You might have other requirements for your SLAs, monthly Tuesday patching for your QA ring, then your prod ring, et cetera. So all of those requirements are things that we can't dictate. What we can do is give you the ability to do your patching with ServiceNow through a change and add your workflow before and after. So this form is kind of irrelevant for most users, but it's there as if you want to test things or whatever. The real meat of the pie, and this is where it gets really fun, is where you start building your workflows, Ashley. So let's talk about workflows for a second. ServiceNow has a flow designer concept that we call Flow Designer. And Flow Designer has a lot of great tools built into it, including the ability to create actions that can be used in workflows. There's also things called subflows and flows. Subflows are things that are common set of things that you would want to repeat or are common set of steps in a workflow that you want to consolidate into a simplified series of steps in a single workflow that you can use in a broader workflow. So it can get very confusing, but to keep it very simple and straightforward, let's talk about Patch Tuesday. Think of Patch Tuesday as the ability for an organization to have a scheduled series of patch deployments go out for their different rings every month, so they're up to date on patching, right? So very simple definition, straightforward, but most customers and partners struggle with this because, again, your patch tool is different than your change management tool, than your workflow tool. And so you have all of these different data sets trying to communicate with each other, putting together a workflow and working in manual ways, and then you end up failing your SLAs or end up not meeting or exceeding those SLAs. What we've done with ServiceNow is combine all of that effort into a single, fully automated workflow. Let's take this example for a second. As a trigger, every month on the 15th at midnight, this workflow is going to execute. It's a scheduled workflow every Tuesday or the Tuesday or every 15th of the month. And you can change that to whatever you want. It's just a ServiceNow schedule trigger. What it's going to do first is it's going to create a change request for you, because this is typically the number one headache, right? Getting the change created, assigning it to the right people, getting the descriptions, everything, implementation plan, backup plan, et cetera, all filled in by a CAB manager or somebody in a patch approval CAB team or whatever, right? There may be different roles and responsibilities. It might be manual, it might be fully automated, but after you create the change, then you have to go back and understand that you have to communicate this change to different people. You have to get approvals. You have to understand what endpoints actually require the patch. And then you have to go through ring-based testing for all of those endpoints. So for us, what we do is we create the change. We have a Tanium action here in the Flow Designer to be able to grab all of the endpoints that are required for monthly Patch Tuesdays. So things like Windows devices that are within the last 30 days. And we can take that as a criteria to define the last 30 days of patches on endpoints that require patches, and then go through each of them to create what we call affected CI records in the change. So since we created the change up here, this workflow is determining all endpoints that require patches for the last 30 days. And it's also adding them to the change itself. So for every endpoint that we captured, we're adding a change affected CI record into the change. This part here is where customers have a lot of struggle with ensuring that the right computers, endpoints, and CIs are in the change, being calculated for and verified for patching. They don't really have a good way of doing that unless they look at spreadsheets or their patching tools. With Tanium and this integration, you automatically know exactly which endpoints you need by just running this action in the workflow. As we pivot over to the rest of the workflow, it's very straightforward. You can build whatever steps you want. For me, I'm actually updating the record to then have someone assess this, right? Someone doesn't have to really assess it. We can assess it automatically. If you have a pre-built change request process that's auto-approved for Patch Tuesday, great. Just throw it in here. It will just work with Tanium. And as we go through approvals, we can do things like wait for approvals if it really truly requires an approval. We can update the change so once it's approved, it goes into a scheduled state. Once it's scheduled, Tanium will then go ahead and create the proper request for patching with all of the relevant information from the previous steps, automatically filling in the requirements for the name, the description, the type of operating system, the change request, the CVE IDs if there are any, and then look back the last 30 days of patches that are relevant. So all of the requirements that we need to deploy a patch request are automatically filled in based on all the previous steps that were inputted. And then lastly, once the change is ready and the request is ready, we will trigger the deployment and have a successful patch be deployed across all endpoints that are included in the change. So think about this, Ashley. How long would a customer, an organization take to come up with all of these steps, step by step, in ServiceNow or other tools? Probably days to weeks, just to understand what to patch, how to patch it, who to get approvals from, and then actually be on the change window time. Everyone's on a call trying to figure out if this QA ring is going to pass or fail, or have backup people just in case something fails, etc. This is fully automated with Tanium and ServiceNow.
Oh, I am thinking about it as you're describing this. I'm thinking, oh my goodness, the most painful part of this is, you've got a scanning tool for vulnerability management out there, probably generating a list of machines, and that doesn't always jive with your patching tool list and all the headaches that involves. But if you just say, okay, Tanium's doing the scan, here's all the affected machines, and then you populate it here, and then you get the approval, and then it pushes out that patch automatically. And I know from our other integrations we've covered on the show that there, and from what you said earlier, is there's this ongoing scan update that says show me the current patch status. So as these patches are going out, we're going to see the completion status rolling back into that. Maybe I don't want to steal your thunder, but that's where it sounds like where we're headed next.
Correct. Yeah. So let's actually walk through it. It's always fun to do a live demo, and it never makes me feel any better than being nervous on a live demo. But
Hmm.
if you look at the fully automated schedule that we had, what we're doing here is let's trigger this, right? So let's test it. So now for you, all of you that know Flow Designer, there's going to be elements of troubleshooting, of course. There's going to be things like, understanding how to look at logs and flow execution details. So for the technical crowd, this is where it gets really interesting, where you see, okay, well, Tanium did run and it created a change request. It grabbed the endpoints for the patches. It went through and added all the CI records, and it's waiting for a condition to be approved. That's actually good, right? So we got all the way down to getting a change created. Let's just make sure we got endpoints. Cool, we got some endpoints here. That's a good set of endpoints. And for each endpoint, what we did was we created a record for a CI list for the change. Perfect. We put the change into approval. So let's go open up the change. Now, every change process for every customer is slightly different. So you're going to have to really fine tune this to what you want to do. And by the way, we don't include like these examples in the out of the box integration. We kind of expect you to watch videos like this and come up with your own creative ways to create workflows that are meaningful for you. So here's a change. So we got the patch Tuesday for August 30th. Moderate risk, impact is high, it's waiting for approvals. And of course, there's a lot of other information you might want to put in as part of your process. But let's scroll down and see what computers we see. Okay, perfect. So these are all the computers that are requiring a patch for the last 30 days. And we see that there's lots of them, actually. That's great. So this is good. Now it's waiting for authorization, right? It's waiting for a approval to kick in. So let's take a look at who our approvers are. So system administrator says, I'm logged in as admin, I'm going to approve this. And what we expect out of this is a very straightforward Tanium patch request being created. So let's go ahead and take a look at if our workflow now has gone through to the next step. All right, so this is actually good. Even though we have an error, we have things built into this integration to make sure you don't deploy a patch request that doesn't meet a set of mandatory requirements. What I mean by that is that every Tanium patch request has a section, or one or two, or at least three different requirements at a minimum that require you to make sure that there are not too many patches in a request. So, there is a limit right now of 50 patches per request that you need to be aware of. There's also a start and end time for a change that will be required. So if you don't have that, then the patch request won't be ready. There's also endpoints required, of course, to be part of the request, and patches requires to be the part of the request. So if we look at this error, right, which is exactly what we want to see, that it's been populated with endpoints and patches that has a start date in the future or is associated with a change request that does not have a planned start date in the future, which is approved. Okay, good. So now our job is to check to see exactly those issues. The first thing I'm going to see is it scheduled. Perfect. Are we approved? I think we approved it, so we should be approved. So just make sure we're approved. Perfect. Now, one step for most of the Tanium admins and ServiceNow admins is that you can see all of your requests in the Tanium patch request section. So go in the all request, and we'll open up the most recent one that we just created. And you'll see in this request, you have reasons why it's not approved or ready to be executed. So we'll go open it up. That's our problem. Everything else is okay. We cannot have more than 50 patches per request. How do we prevent this? I would actually add in a step in the flow designer to double check to make sure that within 30 days, if there are more than 50 patches, split this request into two requests, right? Because you have to understand that we have to be able to do this effectively using ServiceNow, not necessarily just Tanium, but also ServiceNow. So ServiceNow and Tanium have to work really well at scale and be able to respond back and update the relevant request responses in a timely manner as well. So 50 is kind of the limit to start. Well, in the future, we'll be changing that to maybe a higher number as we see usage and demand, but 50 is kind of the limit at this point.
Yeah, and I can't imagine many. And if you're applying patches every month, I can't imagine many months in the Windows world anyway when you would have that many patches.
Correct. Yeah. And for the demo, we had this mostly set so you can see a lot of different patches here. But let's update this to less than 50 patches and let's see what outcome we get out of this. So now it's ready. As you can see, trigger is there, right? So now that we have less than 50, we're going to retry and actually see if now what we can do is we can actually retry directly from here. And what will happen is now in your workflow, you can add in a step to retry up to 3 times. That's the benefit of the flow designer is that we don't dictate your process, right? So you can have error handling in here. You can have verification. There's also an action here called Tanium check status before you deploy. So for example, if I type in Tanium patch, you will see that there's a series of actions here that are available for you. So checks if patch request is ready is what you want to do. And we can drag and drop from our patch request all the way down here. Now, of course, this has to be a step before the patch request is deployed. So what we typically do is we can do this. So now what will happen, Ashley, is we will check to see if it's ready. And if it's not ready, then you can actually decide on doing something else. So if it is not ready, right, it's simple drag and drop. Then we can have it just give a notification or put a log statement or stop everything here at that point. Whatever you want to do could be here. If it is ready, then you can proceed to triggering a patch request. So you can see it's a simple drag and drop experience for most workflows for fully automated patching directly in Flow Designer.
And if somehow that machine was patched in the interim, Tanium, before it applies a patch, it always checks first to make sure it's not already there. So you've got a lot of checks going on all around to make sure it's patched appropriately. Yeah.
It's really important to have these checks because, of course, you don't want to end up patching the wrong machines. You don't want to patch too many machines at once with too many patches. You want to make sure it's stable, it's consistent, it's standardized, and it's scalable in the best way for both platforms. Of course, we have resource limitations on both sides and some accounts that are and machines that are low resource, et cetera. So you have to be considerate of demanding too much, et cetera. So all of those things are considerable factors in how you set this up.
So earlier there were these different patching groups. So I'm guessing you'd have a workflow here called out for your QA ring, your first level prod ring, second tier prod ring, your criticals, and you could have a different workflow for each one of those. And they're all set on a schedule that just kind of follows through.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the sky's the limit when it comes to the type of answers you get back in that chat or portal experience. What I showed you earlier was actually the fully automated workflow where there's no human involved. It just happens automatically on a schedule. But going back to that portal initiated workflow that we were talking about, you can have a request created with a short description that matches or a catalog item that's created, whatever your requirement is to trigger the patch request. It will follow pretty much the same process. But now that you have information from the request, you can take that information like my QA endpoints and look up endpoints directly from with Tanium actions that match QA criteria. You can use in the future, not the first MVP release, but what we're going to be able to do is use a Tanium Automate product that everybody has seen recently and actually execute automate playbooks to go look up QA ring endpoints based on QA computer groups or any other criteria that's relevant to determine your different rings of patching. And then use that as your next step in this workflow. So then for each of those results, you can get back things like affected CIs that will be added to the change. And then we would go ahead and proceed with the exact same series of steps that we saw in the fully automated version, adding in those checks as well. So all of that is something that will be available short term and long term.
As you're describing this, I can't help but think of the Lego movie. Right. So the dad, the bad guy, president business, doesn't like his son mixing the different kinds of Legos. But here we've got the ServiceNow Lego set and the Tanium Lego set. You could build anything with either one of them. So now let's say we've got the Marvel Legos and the Star Wars Legos. So now we've got the Avengers and the Jedi all working on the bad patches together at the same time with all this automation and the things that you could build. Just it's like you said, it's any a number of combinations of what's possible here.
Absolutely. It's wide open, right? So this is your moment to now design your version of what Patch Tuesday looks like, your version of what a chat experience looks like, your version of an LLM powered Now Assist chat experience for patching looks like. We'll give you all the tools and information and data and actions. You build your workflows the way you want it. And that's the beauty of this integration. It's fully open. Developers, administrators, patch teams, do what you want with it, the way you want it, and use our scalable architecture to do this at scale with ServiceNow change management.
Well, this is an impressive workflow and demo here, Saqib. As we wrap up, I'd like to give folks some resources. But before we do that, anything else that you want to make sure we cover before we're done?
I think at the MVP level, this is it, Ashley, the simplistic approach to patch management through ServiceNow change management. And as we learn more and more how customers use this and adopt for this throughout the platform of ServiceNow and Tanium, I think we'll learn a lot more on what's coming next around AI and all the great things around predictive intelligence and understanding and recommending and having confidence in what you're doing before you actually deploy the patch. So those are some of the next level things that are coming. And for the audience, I would encourage you to join us at Converge this year, which is going to be a moment where this and other AI elements of ServiceNow and Tanium are going to be next generation of what Now Assist would look like. So stay tuned for that and appreciate your time.
That's a big hint. We're recording this about 2 months in advance at Converge. I hope you can join us. For now, Saqib, tell folks where they can find the documentation for this.
Yeah, so the documentation will be available on help.tanium.com under our integrations page. There will also be so right now, actually, customers can go to a website for ServiceNow that is called your.servicenow.com/Tanium. It's one-stop shop for all ServiceNow and Tanium related documentation, integrations. There is an ebook that is available with videos, customer case studies, and all the upcoming and current integration details there. So your.servicenow.com/Tanium. That's your one-stop shop.
All right. And specifically, I know we've looked at previous integrations. And if you go to store.servicenow.com, with each one of those, there's a docs link in each of the integrations as well.
Correct. Yeah. Store.servicenow.com will give you access to the applications and all of their information and documentation for the technical crowd. Yeah, that's right.
All right. Well, Saqib, it was good seeing you again in person at Black Hat recently, and I know we'll get to see each other again at Converge. Looking forward to that, spending more time together. And for those of you who are watching, we would love to see you in person as well. Hope you can join us in Orlando this coming November at Converge. So that wraps up this episode of Tanium Tech Talks. Be sure to check out these resources, and we're giving you this kind of early. This is cutting edge stuff. So if this looks like, if you're a big ServiceNow shop and you're thinking this is exactly what I've been waiting on, well, don't waste any time. Let's go ahead and get started. Reach out to your account team, support. We'd love to help you get going with this new integration. So until next time, Go-Tanium.